Hey everyone, welcome back to Pop Trigger. Brett, Jason, Grace, and our special guest, Erica Ash, in a hot seat today. And she's still mad at me about the whole Beyonce thing. You're gonna see that though. Every June 19th, we celebrate something called Juneteenth. Now, a lot of people don't know what that is, but Pharrell and Kenya Barris are working together to bring a musical that's going to really commemorate Juneteenth and get the word out, because like I said, people think of Juneteenth as this celebration in the Black community, and it's not really well known. Now, the two are going to create a musical that's going to focus on two families, one in the Civil War time and then one in present time, to show the juxtaposition of how Juneteenth, I guess the importance of it within that era and a new era. They're going to also collaborate on music. It's going to be a really cool thing, and I wanted to bring light to Juneteenth because people don't know what it is. You know, it's not real. It's not celebrated abroad. Now, Juneteenth is essentially where all the slaves in the further reachings of the South were freed. So yeah, they were freed. They had in the North, but there was a lot of pockets, mainly in Texas, where slave owners still had slaves. And so essentially what that was is the U.S. Army coming in and saying, hey, these people are free, let them go. And what's even more interesting about Juneteenth is that it's very indicative of how Blacks their rights have been delayed throughout history, as far as Jim Crow laws, civil rights, because after their freeing, they were still met with opposition and hard times, be it lynchings, segregation, things of that nature. So yeah, I think this is gonna be really cool. I'm glad that Pharrell and Kenya Barris are able to use their platform to bring awareness to this, because I've been celebrating Juneteenth my whole life. What about you, Erica?
Absolutely not, as a matter of fact. And I'm on the other side of that spectrum, because you know that wasn't something as a military child that we were really even exposed to. And I didn't really understand, I didn't hear of Juneteenth or really know what Juneteenth was until just a few years ago when I was shooting Survivor's Remorse in Atlanta, and we actually did an episode about Juneteenth, and I had to look it up myself to see what it was, because it just wasn't something that I was exposed to. So I'm actually really glad that there's a musical, because I know that I'm not the only one out there who hasn't been exposed and didn't know about it. So I'm glad that it's going to be kind of like pushed to the forefront. People will really know.
I also think it's kind of interesting that if we were to rewind maybe like 10 years ago, it seems sort of weird, like, oh, we're having a musical to talk about this serious historical event. And that landscape totally shifted, I think, with Hamilton. We saw that you can have sort of social commentary on historical events in a meaningful, impactful way that will help people be educated on maybe issues and people and figures and dates and times and places in history. I mean, I was gonna say US history, but really history in general, that perhaps they might not have gotten elsewhere. Not everyone's gonna sit down and watch like a Ken Burns documentary and do the work to educate themselves if they didn't already know what Juneteenth was. But a musical sort of invites more people into the conversation.
It's not really chronicalized in books though, the way you would have other Black days of importance, I guess, because Juneteenth really wasn't considered a holiday. It doesn't mark the signing of the 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, which technically freed the slaves in the rebelling Confederate States, nor does it commemorate the December 1865 ratification of the 13th Amendment, which enshrined the end of slavery into the Constitution. Instead, it marks the moment when emancipation finally reached, like I said, those in deeper parts of the former Confederacy.
Years later.
Yeah.
Years later. That's what's so messed up. And you could say, yeah, when you're talking about the lasting effects of things like this, like today in Kansas, there was the Secretary of State of Kansas is still enforcing a voter registration law that was ruled unconstitutional.
Oh, yeah.
Violating the 14th Amendment, which is one of the 3 amendments that happened after the Civil War. Like that, this whole thing still happens today, and it is so frustrating because you look around and you're like, well, on paper it seems like we settled this already, but in effect you still have to fight for everything.
And that's what they. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
No, I was going to say I was basically going to say the exact same thing that he said, but just kind of across the board. You know, it's like it's the idea that people had this way of life, and then they hear this rumor that the lifestyle's got to change. They're like, oh no, we're going to keep doing what we're doing over here, and then I think still today, people have not gotten the memo.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like that's why it's important for something like Juneteenth to kind of come to the forefront, because people today still aren't getting the memo. Like the certain police officers, not all the police officers, the certain police officers who still think it's okay to lynch people clearly didn't get the memo.
Right.
People who are like, ripping children away from their families clearly didn't get the memo. People who are, enforcing really horrible, voting rules still didn't get the memo. Like, I mean, if you look at pretty much any, legal situation across the board, there are people in different states who still didn't get the memo.
Right.
So I mean, I
feel super fortunate though, growing up in New Mexico, that there was a Juneteenth every June.
Really?
And in New Mexico, yeah, absolutely. Mexico doesn't have a huge black population, so the small population that it has of African Americans were fully aware and really sent the message home to us that this is something we need to celebrate. And it became a ritual for me. So I'm glad that more people. It's like, remember Freaknik?
Yes.
Freaknik was like a celebration in Atlanta that would happen in the summer that, you would travel from all around the country to go to this huge celebration. So I'm glad that it's happening. I think more people should be aware. It's pretty cool.
And I think this is I think that there have been musicals in the past that have dealt with social issues, but they did it in a more subliminal way. What was the one with?
There was like Jesus Christ Superstar. They went to the Holy Land to talk about that, and there were little. It was like using rock and roll to kind of talk about the hippie movement of the time and equate it to Jesus.
Right, but even the one that from the producers of South Park, what was it?
Mormon, the Book of Mormon.
Even the Book of Mormon, they talked about different issues like with the traveling. The traveling Christians who were trying to convert, the Africans, but they talked about the differences in the cultures, people in Africa versus people in America. They talked about how people are viewed, gay and versus straight, lesbian, bisexual, trans. They have all these issues that they touch on sort of subliminally. The one with the puppets.
Avenue Q.
How
do I know all these?
This is gonna be a trivia game. I'm just gonna say like a general phrase from the show, and then whoever chimes in first with the name of it, you win.
Name that musical.
Avenue Q, talks subliminally about issues that are facing us today. But I think with shows like this, Juneteenth, and it's gonna. And Hamilton, it just kind of puts it more out there. It's just it's not subliminal. It's right there in your face, and I think that's important. We need a stronger message.
And it's in tune with the generations. Like millennials seem to really respond to things that would seem like for a previous generation to be too like political and out there. But things like Hamilton seem like they're in line, and this would be in line with that new way of kind of understanding all that.
Yeah, we don't need to have people trying to figure it out and guess about it like the subliminal musicals of yesteryear. We need to just say it how it is. And I think we're gonna get a much bigger and better response from that.